Hi there. For my presentation, I decided to look into an article on autonomy-connectedness, self-constructural, and acculturation, and how that is associated with mental health in a multicultural society. The current study that I'm looking into is by Maas and others in 2018, and I thought it was very interesting. So here we go. A little background on their research. It is important to define a few concepts. The first one is autonomy-connectedness, which basically is the relationship between being able to realize one's own goals and the ability to kind of synchronize and those with the needs of others. And it has kind of three measures that they look at in the study, and those are self-awareness, ability to manage new situations, and sensitivity to others. And so self-awareness, as it sounds, just being aware of one's own opinions and needs, and then sensitivity to others is being able to express your own opinions and needs and being aware of another person's, and capacity for managing new situations is just being flexible to change, having a desire to explore, and is kind of like the core of autonomy. Going on from there, two more concepts that are important to understand are self-constructural and acculturation. Self-construal can be defined as the view of oneself in relationship to the group. In some ways, to describe a person's self-construal may be their level of dependency on others, so like independent versus interdependent, and the idea of individualism versus collectivism, and those are some of the components that they talked about throughout their research. And then acculturation is the ability of an immigrant population to adapt to the host culture while also maintaining their heritage culture. And so previous research on these concepts found interesting relationships between autonomy, connectedness, self-construal, and acculturation in people from Turkish and Moorish societies that had immigrated to Dutch societies, such that self-construal is associated with a greater capacity to manage change in immigrant groups, and that greater sensitivity to others is associated with acculturation. In the current study, they outlined two main hypotheses, the first one having kind of four components within it. So going through those, hypothesis 1A, positive associations between independent self-construal versus self-awareness and capacity for managing new situations. 1B being there would be positive associations between interdependent self-construal and sensitivity to others. 1C being there would be positive associations between adaptation to the Dutch culture versus independent self-construal and self-awareness. And then 1D, positive associations between maintenance of culture of origin and an interdependent self-construal and sensitivity to others. And their second hypothesis kind of sums up the mental health side of the study, saying that positive association of autonomy-connectedness deficits with psychopathology in immigrant and Native groups. And then the participants for their study included 1,209 people from a wide variety of backgrounds that you see there, and they excluded Indonesian and immigrants from Western societies because the Indonesian people were kind of far different than the rest of the immigrant groups, and the immigrants from Western societies would be too comparable to the Dutch natives. And so in total, they had 516 Dutch natives and 459 immigrants from a variety of places. And in their analyses, age, gender, net income, marital status, and educational level were accounted for, and the differences were controlled in both groups. So in their collection of data, Maas and his team used a number of scales for their study to test for autonomy-connectedness, self-construal, acculturation, and various psychopathologies, including anxiety, depression, and eating disorders. And there you see all of the different scales they included in their questionnaire. And so after collecting their data from participants' self-report questionnaires, they conducted several hierarchical regression analyses based on their hypotheses. And so going on to their results, what did they find? These are some of the main findings summed up here. They found that independent self-construal was positively associated with ability to manage new situations, so confirming hypothesis 1A that we saw earlier. An interdependent self-construal was positively associated with sensitivity to others, confirming hypothesis 1B. And then when looking at the immigrant sample, acculturation was not positively associated with autonomy-connectedness, being sensitivity to others, self-awareness, ability to manage change. Therefore, hypothesis 1C and 1D were not confirmed by the results. And then looking at their second hypothesis, first, looking at anxiety and depression, Maas and his team found higher scores for anxiety and depression overall in the immigrant group. Furthermore, their results on anxiety and depression confirmed hypothesis 2 that autonomy-connectedness deficits, which, as a reminder, those deficits are characterized by high sensitivity to others, low self-awareness, and low capacity for managing new situations. They found that that was associated with more anxious and depressive symptoms, I believe, in both groups. And then in regard to eating-related psychopathology, they found negative correlations between independent self-control and body dissatisfaction, as well as bulimia, and positive correlations between interdependent self-control and drive for thinness and bulimia. And then overall, these results on eating disorders further confirmed their second hypothesis that autonomy-connectedness deficits were associated with eating-related psychopathology. And then, to sum this all up, overall immigrants reported lower scores on sensitivity to others than Dutch natives, and I thought that was interesting, and kind of pondered maybe why they found that. So I wondered, could immigrants' lower scores on sensitivity to others be explained by their acculturation, thinking that immigrants have had to deal with balancing host and heritage culture, therefore building resilience to deal with conflicting situations and being less sensitive to others. And they also found that in both populations, positive self-construal was associated with higher self-awareness, increased ability to manage new situations, and less sensitivity to others. And that immigrants scored higher in all but one measure of psychopathology. And I thought that was interesting as well. That could be explained maybe by greater risk, or I think more plausible would be less available or culturally appropriate treatment for immigrant or minority populations with mental illness and everything. And overall autonomy-connectedness was found to be an important construct for Western and non-Western cultures that they found in this study. And I think there are some limitations to the research done here. The cross-sectional design of the study kind of made it hard to identify any causal factors, and therefore these results are simply associations. Nothing is cause and effect. And there could be, because of the self-report questionnaires, social desirability could have a play in some of the results. Also, language barrier for some of the immigrant populations, because the test was administered in Dutch, which could be difficult for some immigrant groups. And the immigrant sample was very heterogeneous, so there was people from many different cultural backgrounds within the immigrant population that they all lumped together, so that maybe looking at each culture individually would show maybe more of a difference, less of a difference. And then something else that I thought of after reading this article, from what we have learned in class about culture-bound syndromes and testing cross-culturally, I wonder if this study could have been conducted in a way that was maybe more sensitive to cultural differences, possibly leading to different results. And I think that's another one of their limitations. But regardless, I think these findings are very interesting and show how our culture shapes the way that we think about ourselves and ourselves in relationship to others across cultures. Thank you for listening.